Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. In part 5 of our conversation with Dr. Jonathan Stapley, we're going to talk about faith healing, alternative medicine, and even folk remedies that some people refer to as magic. Are there similarities with this and Julie Rowe and Joseph Smith with early seer stones? I think you'll find this a very interesting episode. Check it out. The last chapter I remember you talked about was very interesting because you kind of went back to healing again, and you did talk a little bit about what you called the cunning folk magic or
cunning folk traditions.
Cunning folk traditions, which people like Michael Quinn have referred to as magic, and you kind of related that to some of the modern multi-level marketing things. So that was very interesting. Could you talk about that?
Right. So first off, magic is a term that is othering. It's essentially, magic is something that other less sophisticated people do. And there's been a tremendous amount of scholarship to show that it's essentially a pejorative term that it doesn't really shed analytical light onto a topic. So scholars have kind of moved away from magic as a descriptive term of religious practice. Now, I should state first off that Mike Quinn's work and Taylor's work that were so controversial when they were first revealed did really important path-breaking work at the time. Even though I might not agree with all the ways in which it was framed, but what has happened since then in the last 20 years, the scholars, especially in Europe and England and Europe, have really done an excellent job on focusing on what are called cunning folk. And these are the people that found what was lost. They were seers. They had used seer stones, used astrology a lot. They healed the sick. They fought witches. So the church lost interest in witches. So the Enlightenment, witches weren't really real, so the church wasn't interested in them. People still believed in witches, and so the cunning folk battled the witches. They were Gandalf is a cunning folk, if you will. We can kind of imagine that, right? Except they were, in England and Europe, they were a fixture of the town. There were people that used the deprecated cosmologies of the past, had a textual tradition. They used charms, amulets, things like that. Now, in the United States, and like I said, there's these scholars in Europe that have done a tremendous amount of work contextualizing and telling the story of these people. Really, really great work. In America, there was not the same level of sophistication or the tradition, if you will, of cunning folk existed in an attenuated fashion. That is to say, there were people on the fringes of society that used seer stones, that found what was lost. They might use charms, but they weren't the town cunning woman or cunning man, right? Although, like I said, there's aspects of their work that were popularized or at least held on in society by people on the fringes. And one of the things one of the topics that scholars in Europe have shown is that when witches, everyone kind of concludes, as well as the church, that witches really are not a huge threat, that cunning folk essentially become herbal healers, botanic healers, right? And so, and Mormonism has this great tradition of botanic medicine, which descended from kind of popular evangelical trends in America at the time of the so-called Second Great Awakening that were independent of the cunning folk. But at the same time, Mormons have been open to people that believed in an open heaven. So if there were, in the face of pharmacological failure or clinical failure in medicine. Mormons have been open to a blessing from a priesthood officer or an authorized healer, whether they're male or female, throughout our history. So we're open to the miraculous. Now, Latter-day Saints also have been open to other aspects of supernatural cures. So whether it's a botanical cure or a special prayer. In the 20th century, these impulses, so the cunning folk that is no longer battling witches, but is instead a botanic healer, is manifest in society through complementary and alternative medicines. So Mormons are not in any way holding a monopoly on complementary and alternative medicines. You can go to the bookshelves of your favorite Whole Foods market that's frequented by the liberal elite, and you can hang out with evangelicals in the South, and they are both doing similar things in this area of complementary and alternative medicine. When faced with a challenge, humans want hope, and they find hope in people offering these alternative cures. Now, in Mormonism, we have really interesting relationship with these alternative cures. Sometimes it's strictly botanical, but sometimes, for example, there was a popular healer, Julie Rowe, who was part of this Christ-centered energy healing movement that the church has spoken out against a little bit in the past several years. But there is individuals that function, again, on the peripheries of society that are willing to provide hope to those that need it. And I won't say that Julie Rowe you can trace her lineage through successive waves of cunning folk thought to the present. I don't think that that's necessarily true, although there are remarkable parallels between energy healing and magnetism that was popularized in the 19th century. I don't think there's a direct lineal descent from the cunning woman to Julie Rowe, but I do think that they serve a similar function in society. And by understanding one, it contextualizes the other.
Well, it's interesting to me because a lot of people like to bag on Mormons about, multi-level marketing and alternative medicine. But, this, as you said, it goes to evangelicals and others as well. So,
and then there's some really great literature on multi-level marketing among close-knit evangelical churches, because they're similar organizations that function on trust between adherents. There are more evangelicals than there are Mormons, so it's not surprising that the majority of the business of multi-level marketing is non-Mormon.
Yeah.
It's not even though it flourishes in a Mormon context, it's not unique or even a majority of the business isolated within Mormonism.
Mm-hmm. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Jonathan Stapley. In our next conversation, we'll talk about baby blessings. What is the theological significance of that?
Remember, the Lord's clerk. He has a book of remembrance. Book of remembrance is the book that Adam creates. And so he has this sacred document in which he is to inscribe the inheritance of Zion. And if you come to Zion, you receive an inheritance. That is your inheritance for time and eternity, while the earth shall stand, and in eternity when it's renewed. And when babies are blessed, their name is written in the book of remembrance, and they receive this inheritance. They're essentially brought into this salvific community, where salvation is no longer an individual affair.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you like our page on facebook.com/gospeltangents. You can subscribe at youtube.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter @gospeltangents, as well as make sure that you subscribe on iTunes so you don't miss any of our episodes. Thanks again for listening. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our videos. Thanks again.